Hello, and welcome to Leadership Trail Mix. I am Miguel Oliveira, and I'm super excited for today's episode. I'll be a chat with Madeline Miller. Madeline, welcome to Leadership Trail Mix.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Madeline is from Australia. She lives in LA. She's a career and leadership coach, entertainment lawyer, and creator of the Dream Career Accelerator program. Our chat today will be about career protagonism, which is something very important for us as leaders, but that we also need to support our employees and our teams on. So, Madeline, I think the first question, the best way for us to kick off this chat is to ask, what compelled you to create the Dream Career Accelerator program? And on that note, how do you describe a dream career?
Oh, a great question. So I'll start with the second question first because it kind of leads into the first question. So I would describe a dream career as a career that fulfills you and lights you up. And I think there's a lot of expectations put on us about what a career should look like. And I think that can get in our head a lot, particularly in the early years of work. And so I really am trying to redefine a career as your own journey to take control of and shut out the noise. The reason I created the program was that I had started coaching private clients a couple of years ago, and I recognized that a lot of executive coaching, which is what I would have called I was doing, like executive coaching, was focused on the most senior leaders, and I really felt like there was this huge gap in the market for people early and mid-career who are really sort of struggling to find their way and not getting the access to executive coaching that other people are. And I felt, as somebody that had really struggled to find my way, I would have loved to get some guidance on how to take control of your career and really map it out, create your own dream career. So that's really the origins of why I created the program.
I love that. And the program is focused on millennials and Gen Zers. And what do you think is the main difference between how these two generations approach their careers in comparison to the generations before and after?
I mean, I don't want to completely generalize, but, based on my understanding and also, I guess, the data, because there is a lot of stuff done these days on people at work, I think that the Gen Z and millennials are a little bit more purposeful and intentional about their careers. I mean, the data on Gen Z shows that they tend to be driven by a much more sense of purpose. They really care about a company's values. Millennials, entered the workforce in a particular period, a bit of economic insecurity. So they're quite focused on sort of leadership and building out their little piece of the pie. So I feel like sort of the generational influences at each time that a generation has entered the work definitely influences how they approach work. And I think, but the overall shift, I think, is probably that Gen Z and millennials no longer necessarily see a job for life, and they're not maybe as grateful for work. And I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that they feel more entitled to have a career that they enjoy, that they feel happy by, whereas I think previous generations, again, without wanting to generalize, we, worked because you had to work, right? And that's an honorable thing to do. And you just did your job, paid your time, and you retired. I think now there's a lot more consciousness around what work really is and how we want to spend our time.
That makes complete sense. Absolutely. And your answer is just the perfect segue into my next question to you, which is about the framework you propose, the approach for career protagonism called AIR. And you see me smile right now. It's because as a non-English speaker, I constantly make fun of how many acronyms there are in the English language. So back to the topic. I'd love for you to talk us through the framework AIR and kind of help us, at least give us a taste of what it is like.
Sure. So when I really started to think more deeply about this, I reflected a lot on my career, which, by the way, you can read more about in an upcoming ebook, which I will share a link with you after the program.
Yes.
Coming up very soon. So I talk a little bit more about my background and my work experiences and how that informed its development. But, to cut it sort of short for this podcast, I really took stock about 15 years into my career and thought back at everybody I, interacted with and all the different countries I'd worked in and industries I worked in and sectors I worked in. And I tried to look for universal themes about what I thought people wanted and what brought out the best in people. And what I believe is that everybody wants to feel that the work they do has some kind of value and feel purposeful. Now, that does not mean that it needs to be, like social justice driven. I think sort of confuse that a little bit when we talk about purpose. It just means that you want to show up every day, feel like your work is adding to something you care about and that you're recognized for that work, right? So that's why I started with alignment, to really feel that you are doing something that brings out the best in you, that's aligned with what you care about, your values, or, even just the tasks you like to do. I call that alignment. I think that's very important. And there's studies
Mm.
that support how misalignment can be a leading cause of burnout.
Yep.
So, and also having a sense of purpose. There's a lot of medical research on that. They use with Alzheimer's patients, it's good for the brain. So there's a lot of stuff to support the fact that we all want to feel engaged in the work we do. So that's why I started with alignment. And that sort of takes my clients through a lot of values work, energy auditing, what motivates me, what depletes my battery, and even like, who am I as an individual and brand. So we do a lot of that exploration of that stuff to really get clear on what alignment means to them. And then the second thing I observed was that everybody wants to feel recognized for the work they do. Right? They want to feel like they have some influence and input, and that's why I really focus on influence for the second tier. But my version of influence is really feeling very authentic and confident in the way you're showing up. So it's not forcing influence. It's like taking the alignment we looked at and then working out how to best showcase all those unique gifts, skills, and purpose you have. And then also, the big thing in the workplace, and I'm sure every person listening to this will nod their head, is we have conflicts with other people constantly, right? Like we have difficult conversations, misunderstandings, assumptions, disagreements, and that is natural. I think we think that that's problematic. It's not. It's how we deal with it that's problematic. So when I talk about having influence, we do a lot of work with everybody on effective communication and conflict resolution. So then the third thing, resilience, is sort of like the evolution as you practice, as you find greater alignment, as you practice those great skills to more influence. The resilience comes from continuing, like having that stable sense of self and clarity, and then putting it into practice and not falling apart when things don't work, learning from your mistakes. So it's really like that increasing self-awareness that makes us more emotionally resilient. And from that place, we can take bigger risks, we can deal with setbacks, we can ask for things we want. So all of those nice, but sometimes scary things that we avoid in the workplace, we become better at.
That's awesome. That's so, so cool. And I have to ask, kind of bringing a lot of what you said and what you've told us so far together, what is the role that the company and leaders need to play? I understand that we are talking about protagonism, but unless your career is a monologue and you're talking to a camera, there has to be some other characters there kind of playing their own roles, right? So what should people expect in this new world their companies and their leaders should provide?
Yeah, I mean, great question. A lot of the stuff around coaching sometimes blurs the line between what I would call individual responsibility and organizational systems, right? So we are all playing a part in a system, and systems have their own way of doing things, and systems, as we know, can be toxic, they can be oppressive, et cetera, et cetera. So the more power you have to influence a system, the more I encourage you to influence it positively. So to do the work I'm talking about, so you can then be the change that other people feel. So that's how I sort of see the interplay there.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. And what do you recommend that people do if they find themselves not getting the system support or the support from the system that you are referring to?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of a case by case situation, because I always say, start with yourself, learn to control what you control. I think we can all be doing better. Like, I bet you are all not perfectly communicating. We're not super well emotionally regulated. We maybe need to improve our skills of persuasion and negotiation. Maybe we don't have that alignment and purpose clear and we're not showing our best self. So there's definitely work you can do. You can stop people pleasing. You can stop being a perfectionist, right? All of these things I would say are things you can control, but you can only have so much impact in an organization that's not going to support you. So I say, depending on, individually, like, can you lead? Do what you can to become the best version of you. Put your best self forwards. And if that means managing up and managing down, so be it. There will come a point at which you'll know that you can no longer thrive in a workplace. And that's usually when we sort of make the assessment about whether it's time to leave.
I love that. I love that, Madeline, because I've said a few times, sometimes we behave as hostages in an open cell, right? I mean, the door is open, we can leave, but for some reason, I think there is a narrative in our minds kind of keeping us captive when we should no longer stay. So I love that sometimes we recognize that that's the path.
Yeah, if I could just add something to that, because there's that, I find that so interesting. And I think we all become a little bit of victims of work. We
Mm,
are sometimes trapped in a situation. We all need to work, right? Like,
yep.
it's a capitalist system at the end of the day. But I think that there's this psychological thing called career enmeshment, where we tie so much of our identity and ego to our work. And
Mm,
I think we make ourselves suffer more than we need to. And that's, I sort of dive into that a little bit in my ebook, but I definitely did that, right? Like, I was so miserably overworked and unhappy, and I wasn't performing parts of myself at the best, but I also felt like I had to prove something by staying somewhere. So it's super complex.
I hear you. No, that's awesome. My last question, Madeline, as we get close to the end of this chat, we always end our episodes with a call to action, something that people can do today or start doing today. And if you could leave us with two here, one for ourselves as leaders and one for something that we can do to support our employees, what would be call to actions here? One, looking at ourselves in the mirror, and secondly, trying to pay it forward with our teams.
So if I was to say to an individual who's unhappy at work, do one thing, right? Like, start here. I would start with investigating your own sense of alignment. That means I would work out your professional values and your purpose, your mission and purpose. And from there, I would then use that clarity to work out how you can better show up, or if a situation is or isn't serving you. So I definitely think going back to building the foundation, like making the bricks strong, starting with that, that's the one thing I would say to do, like, tomorrow. To a company, if you are, I mean, it's a bit of a big question, but let's maybe narrow it a little bit and say, if you're a leader and you have responsibility over younger employees, so maybe more Gen Z and millennials, and I'm using that as an example because that seems to be where there's a lot of friction these days. I would not assume their intentions.
Mm.
I would be curious about their experience. Senior leaders in a company need to lead by example, and in order to do that, they need to truly be curious and ask how Gen Z and millennials are experiencing the workplace.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Madeline, thank you so much for being part of Leadership Trail Mix and sharing such powerful thoughts with us today. For those listening to us, Madeline mentioned her ebook a couple of times. And as usual, I'm going to gift a few copies once we get there. But you can find her on Madeline Miller Coach on LinkedIn. Any other place where people can find you, Madeline?
Yes. So my website, so it's coachingwithmadeline.com. And also I'm on LinkedIn, as you said, and also I'm on Instagram, which is Madeline Miller Coaching.
That's all for today, folks. If you want to share your thoughts about this episode, you know where to find me, Miguel at leadershiptrailmix.com. And if you want to support this podcast, please feel free to share it. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and talk soon.